I want to ask you first thing, this is the same from Pembas to everyone. Going back to your beginnings, what made you decide to be an attorney? And tell us about your law school experience.
So what led me to be an attorney, I think, was when I was young, I had a real interest in the law. I thought being a lawyer would be just an incredibly rewarding profession. And I also had an interest in architecture. So even up through high school, I was waffling on which way to go. My father ran a restaurant in a small town, Morganton, where I grew up, North Carolina, foothills. And it was a restaurant where a lot of the lawyers and judges came to eat lunch every day. And I worked there in the summers. So I interacted with a lot of the lawyers. And they were just really incredible people. They had the best stories. They drove the nicest cars. They dressed the nicest, and all that. I thought, this looks like a pretty good gig. But there was one in particular. There was a guy named Robert B. Bird, Bond Bird. Bob Bird, as he was known, he was really an icon in our local community, not only in the bar, but in the community as a whole. And he was just kind of an inspirational guy, somebody you wanted to be around all the time, and you kind of wanted to emulate. And he was a bit of a mentor to me, and I think that's why I went into the legal profession.
And your time in law school, tell us about that.
So my time in law school, I graduated from college at NC State, and I immediately went to work on Governor Hunt's staff. So I worked on his staff for 3.5 years, and I had decided I didn't necessarily want to do that for a career and stay in politics, because that's a challenging business. But I decided to leave and go to law school, went to Campbell. So I did 3 years at Campbell Law School when it was still in Bowie's Creek, which was quite a culture shock after being in Raleigh for 4 years, or 8 years actually, and then going to Bowie's Creek. So that was different. But the great thing about it was very conducive to studying. Not a lot of partying. It was great.
And what do you see now for these attorneys or these law students who do get to go to Campbell in downtown Raleigh? What kind of benefit or difference would that be for them, you think?
Oh my gosh, this is a world of difference. Just the facility alone is incredibly better and different from what we had. I think, of course, the really good thing is access to the bar, the local bar, and all the courts, bankruptcy court, the federal courts, the local state courts. They have access to everything. And there's so many lawyers here in the Wake County area, in the Triangle area, that they have access to, and clinics and programs. There weren't any clinics really when I was there 40 years ago. And now there's, 6 or 8 clinics that Judge Leonard started. So the opportunities are so much greater, I think, for the students. Yeah.
So you touched on a little bit of a mentor that you had in the beginning of your career. Talk to me about the importance of that mentor-mentee relationship throughout your career when you were up and coming and you needed that mentor, and then later as you were a mentor to another.
I think finding other lawyers in your local bar who practice, preferably in the same type of area of practice as you, and learning from them is an incredible asset. They call it the practice of law for a reason. It takes many, many years of practicing law to become really, really proficient at it. So to me, probably the biggest asset I had were other lawyers. And I did a lot of criminal law when I was in practice. And, learning how to try a case, learning how to determine what is a reasonable plea offer and what's not, that's not something you learn in law school. I mean, yeah, you learn the rules of evidence and so on, but you really learn by watching others, talking to others. And one of the first things I did was, of course, get active in the bar. And then we had a group called the Wake County Academy of Criminal Trial Lawyers. And Robert McMillan and Wade Smith and Duncan McMillan, Roger Smith, and all those guys, they were a wealth of knowledge, so I wanted to be around those guys and listen to them and watch them try cases. And, I talked to them about, what do you do as a young lawyer? What do you advise? And pretty much the number one answer was, go watch experienced lawyers try cases. And that's what I did. And I thought that was a huge help. And that we have some great mentors in our local bar. So if I were a young lawyer coming along, the first thing I'd do is read the Creed of Professionalism. And I know it's just a bunch of words, but no, it's really not. It's very meaningful, and a lot of people spend a lot of time crafting that. And I would read that every year, and take it to heart, and I would find other lawyers who are more experienced than me to watch and to learn from. I mean, it's kind of like playing tennis. You try to play, if you want to be a better tennis player, you play with somebody who's better than you are. It's the same thing with law. I mean, you want to be around lawyers who've been doing it a while and who are better than you are. So,
do you consider yourself, I mean, obviously, in any father-son relationship or parent-child relationship, there's going to be that mentor-mentee relationship, but do you think you've been a legal mentor for your son? Or is his practice different from yours and his?
It's a little bit different, but I think he probably went into the legal profession because of me, in large part. That was not something I directed or pushed. I kind of left it up to both of our children. We're going to give you opportunities, and if there's something you're interested in, we'll help you get access to it and learn, but it's up to you what you decide to do. So I think the decision to become a lawyer was his, and I think it probably was in large part because I was. In law school, he would call me occasionally, with evidence questions or, things like that, and I would share my thoughts on. Since he's in practice, not as much of that because he's in a good firm with some good guys, and I don't think he needs my advice, but we still talk regularly.
What did it mean for you to see him get sworn in?
That's pretty special. I had the privilege of swearing him in to the bar, so that truly was one of the great moments in my life, I'll tell you. It was neat.
So, take us through your career path.
Oh my goodness. So as I said, I grew up in Morganton, attended public schools, went to NC State, spent 4 years there, had a lot of fun in undergrad. And then I went to work on Governor Hunt's staff, which was an incredible experience because I learned so much about state government. And he was such a mentor as far as being a public servant. I mean, he was the gold standard of, people who are really committed to public service for the right reasons. So 3.5 years there, left to go to law school, 3 years at Bowie's Creek, and then came out, went to work with a 7-person firm. At the time, there was kind of a real estate boom. American Airlines was moving a hub into Raleigh at the time, and IBM was moving a lot of people into the Research Triangle Park. So the real estate closing business was very big, and we did a lot of that. So initially, I was doing a lot of the residential real estate closings, 30, 40 a month. We had 2 offices, one in Cary, one in Raleigh. It was Demick, Reagan, Dodd, and Tom's, and so I did a lot of that. And then I sort of was back up to the criminal lawyer, full-time criminal lawyer in the firm, Mike Dodd. So, when not doing real estate closings, I was at the courthouse a lot, in district court and superior court. That sort of, evolved into more of a criminal law practice. And eventually we transitioned out of real estate, although it was profitable. It was not as profitable as other areas and just wasn't where our interest was. And so I did that. So I was in private practice for 8.5 years, I guess. And then there was an opening on the bench in 1994. Stafford Bullock moved to Superior Court, and they had a bar vote, 3 names, Brian Collins and I think Hugh Thompson and I were the 3 names that went up to the governor, and I got picked. So that's how we initially went on the bench in 1994. Contested election in 96, and then I prevailed. So I had 6 elections. And then in 2007, Judge Joy Hamilton retired. She was our chief district court judge. So Chief Justice Sarah Parker appointed me as the chief district court judge. So I was on the bench for 26 years. The last 13, I was chief, and then I retired in 2020.
Do you think that each experience led to the next, like being with Governor Hunt led you to be successfully reelected, and private practice led you to on the bench? Talk about that.
I think it did. I would never have run for district court judge or even put my name in the hat had I not been in private practice. I'd have been in for 8 years or so, because I'd been in long enough to learn, what lawyers do, how to practice law. And I'd spent enough time in district court that I felt comfortable that I could do what district court judges do. I'd appeared in almost all the courtrooms, or the types of practice we handled, juvenile, domestic, all of them. And I felt like that I was in a position that I could do a pretty good job. So that's why I put my name in the hat. But yeah, I think each phase sort of prepared me for the next. And like I said, the state government, that being in the governor's office for 4 years, I did a lot of constituent service. So you handled a lot of problems, people calling in. It might be local elected officials, or it might be citizens with issues. And we had contacts in each area of state government, so every department. So I got to, I really got familiar with state government and who was who and those kind of things. So it was good.
Can you describe the change in the legal landscape here in Wake County from the time that you started to now in 2024?
A lot of changes. When I first started, when I got out of law school in 85, so when I started practicing, the entire Wake County Jail was on the 5th floor of the courthouse. All of the courtrooms were there, of course. There were, a lot fewer lawyers.
I was going to say, how many lawyers were there in Wake County in 85?
I don't know. I'd actually looked for that number and I couldn't find it. There were a lot fewer. And it felt like that you knew every lawyer. And if there was a lawyer you didn't know, you probably knew somebody in their firm, his or her firm, that you could talk to and say, hey, what's the word on this person? Or do you know this young lawyer? Christmas parties were out at the faculty club, not a big group. It was maybe 100 or 200 lawyers. There were certain ones, Wright Dixon, Charlie Blanchard, who loved to dance. So they would dance all night long with all the wives and everybody. All the lawyers loved that because but it was different. A lot less diversity, and that's been a good change to see the diversity evolve. But technology was so different. When I started out, say real estate for practice, for example, there was, you didn't have online real estate searches. We were using books, and there was I think it was the 7th floor of the courthouse was what we call a vault. And the vault was basically a room with just racks and racks of these big canvas or leather books alphabetically. And you would go through and pull those things, and they're heavy, and put them up on the counter and turn through them to find, the grantor in a real estate transaction. They even had, you would look up civil actions to see if they were in a civil action. They even had something called a lunacy docket. And it was a big book, and it said lunacy docket. And you would pull that to see if the person's name appeared in that, to make sure there was not a competency question. It was kind of bizarre when you think about it, and it was just a room full of paralegals and lawyers, just like little mice in there, working every day, pulling those books, looking at them, putting them back. And that went on all the time. Of course, that's all computerized now. Legal research, libraries full of books. You pull the books, you look for head notes, you go pull the cases. Now it's just clicks of buttons. That's probably the biggest change, I guess, the technology. It's been amazing.
Can you tell me your most memorable time in the courtroom as an attorney and your most memorable time in the courtroom as a judge?
Wow. That's a good question. I don't know if I can remember my most memorable time as an attorney. Sometimes you can't control what clients say. And I had a case one time where we prevailed, and the client, we stood up, getting ready to leave, and he looks at the DA and he says, "My lawyer just kicked your backside." So he didn't say backside, he just kicked your ass. And, the DA, young female DA, was astonished and mortified. I was shocked. I just immediately grabbed him by the arm and said, "Come on, we need to go." And I left before I got him out of the courtroom before we could get to the point of a judge being involved in it or contempt. So that's one that kind of stuck with me. There's a lot of courtroom moments. I think the courtroom moments that stick out the most in my mind was I presided for about 20 years over a drug court, which are now called recovery courts. So it's unlike a typical court. It's a therapeutic court, met every other Friday for about an hour or two. And for an entire year, maximum of 2 years, the participants in there had been convicted of a drug offense or a criminal offense, and they had a diagnosed substance abuse disorder. So it was remarkable to see the transformation of a lot of those participants from the time they came into court, where they would say anything or do anything to try to get out of it, to try to get drugs and continue the lifestyle they were in, versus a year later when they're closer to finishing the program, and how a lot of them had gotten stable. They looked better, they were healthier, they got jobs, and it just changed their life. And I think if they successfully completed, we had what was called a graduation, which was a little recognition in court and all. And usually their family was there. And I can remember more than one time where you had a family member or members who were there in the courtroom who would stand up and thank the team, not just me, but the substance abuse counselors and the probation officers and so on. And hear somebody say, thank you for giving me my husband back, or thank you for giving us our brother back. You saved his life. That was probably one of the most meaningful experiences I ever had in the courtroom.
And this profession, as you know, it often lends itself to stress and how through your career did you cope with caseload and stress and managing all of that? And what would your best advice be?
Best way?
Your best advice be for managing that for someone in the legal profession?
It's a difficult thing, because if you think about it, a lot of the work that lawyers do, it is clients coming to you with a problem. And it may be the biggest problem in their life. Some of them, they're at their lowest point in the life. It's a divorce. Their child's on drugs or in juvenile court. They're charged with a crime. They're in crisis, a lot of them. And they basically hand this problem off to you and expect you to shoulder it and fix it. And that's challenging. It really is, and the stress is incredible. I think that you really have to condition yourself to be able to separate your own personal life from those issues. You need to be able to walk away from it and not let it just eat on you all the time. That, I think, is probably the biggest thing, is just trying to be able to separate it. Once a case is resolved, you need, especially as a judge, you need to be able to move on, not second guess what you did, because you could do that forever. But I think, that is the big thing, is being able to separate personal life from practice. You also need to learn that not everybody's crisis is your crisis. It got a lot of that, especially when I was chief, people coming to you with problems that were not necessarily my problem. Although I was sensitive, I tried to help when I could. But I think young lawyers need to accept that there's some things you can't completely fix. A lot of the problems we encounter, especially in domestic situations, it's taken years and years to get to the moment of crisis where they are. So it can't be fixed just overnight. So I think you have to learn that and do the best you can.
Can you tell us about an ethical dilemma that you faced in your career?
I think that there have probably been, one of the situations is where a situation that's always uncomfortable for a judge is when a lawyer gets frustrated and does something in court. Nobody wants that. No judge wants to embarrass a lawyer. And there have been times where something is said or something is done in open court by a lawyer that forces your hand, and you have to do something. We have inherent authority to do some things, even take a law license. But and that has occurred where, a lawyer has done something like that. And what I have done most times is try to take the lawyer into chambers, let them cool down, take them into chambers, and have a discussion. And it usually results in an apology. And we talk about the rules of ethics and so on. Lots of times that's a solution. Sometimes, if it's bad enough, you have a duty to report it. And we have to do that. But I think those kind of ethical situations have been the hardest. I remember a time I was presiding, two younger lawyers, plaintiff's lawyer presented their case, either forgot or just didn't present damages in the case. It was I think, a automobile accident case. Pretty clear liability, but just didn't present any damages. So there was nothing for the jury to really award. And, I tried in a very nice, kind of fair way to say, all right, you say you want to close. Is there anything else you want to present before you rest? I didn't want to come out and say you didn't do so-and-so because the other side would be jumping up and down. So, that was a real kind of a ethical dilemma for me. How much do I help this young lawyer without being unfair to this lawyer?
So what happened?
Well, I tried to do it in a way that, I didn't say you didn't present any damages, but I did say, do you need a minute to review or decide, or are you ready to rest? And he paused for a moment, and then he rested his case. And they came back with nominal damages of $1. And of course, once he figured out what he was done, he was livid and was very upset. And, he wanted me to set aside the judgment or reopen the case. No. Doesn't work that way. And that was very awkward. And it created some hardships for that lawyer. But, there again, that's why we call it practice. It's a learning process.
Sounds like he learned.
He did, and it's a hard learning process sometimes.
So, tell us a little bit about your life outside the law. Robert Rader outside the law.
Well, I grew up in the small town, Morganton, in the foothills. So I spent a lot of time around the mountains. I love the mountains of North Carolina. It's just, to me, it's the most beautiful area. So over the years, I have I've always done hiking and things like that. And our family enjoys going to the mountains. And we now have a little place up there near Linville Gorge. So I spend as much time as I can up there. Hiking in Linville Gorge, Wilson's Creek area, and Grandfather, all around in there. Fly fishing, I took that up about, 25 years ago or so. Love to fly fish because I think it just, being on a mountain stream is about as good as it gets, whether you're catching anything or not. So to me, if somebody said, where's your happy place? That's probably my happy place. But love being on a mountain stream. And I do that as often as I can. It's not as often as I would like. When I call it being on the treadmill, when you're working, and especially in the practice of law or being a judge or whatever, you're so busy, it feels like you don't have a lot of free time. So that's what I was looking forward to the most in retirement. So I retired in 2020, and that's given me time to read more. It's given me time to focus. One of my little hobbies is woodworking. So I've spent some time doing that, taking some woodworking classes and all. So I've gotten to do more of that. I bought a guitar and play around with that. So, I love music. So music, woodworking, fly fishing, hiking, that's what I get to do.
You talked about how you, particularly as a judge, you had to, and as an attorney, you have to separate yourself. Their problems aren't your problems, even though they brought them to you to fix. Did that life outside the law help with that? Do you understand what I'm asking?
I think.
So, like, your life outside the law, did it as you were practicing and as you were a judge, you knew that you could go home to that.
Yeah. Yeah, it did. I mean, you always look forward to that, and that's what keeps you grounded. And my wife used to, I guess when we were first married, she was like, "How was it today? What'd you do today?" And I told her, "See, some days are stressful, and you live through this stress for 6 or 8 hours. I don't really want to come home and relive that and have to explain all the details or intricacies of a case or a challenge." So we kind of got to where at night we didn't talk about the law much. I mean, we didn't talk about cases, things like that. So it was more leisure time. It did help you separate.
What do you think, in your opinion, what will the future of the legal profession in Wake County be like?
I have faith that it's going to be good. We have challenges, not just in Wake County, but as a whole. In North Carolina, and I think this is true in the country, we have the legal deserts problem, where there are areas with no lawyers or one lawyer, which is a challenge. Whereas in Wake County, we have 6,000 lawyers. I think our challenge in Wake County is the reverse. We have so many lawyers that you don't have the camaraderie that we used to have. I think technology has contributed to that, and just the volume of people. So you don't know all the lawyers. There's no way you can know them all. You're not interacting with them on a social basis as much. So I think that changes the practice. A small town or small county judicial district where you've got 50 lawyers, they all know each other. They come together for a Christmas party or a meeting, and it's a social, and everybody knows each other. And if they have an issue, they call the other one and have a conversation. Here, I think there's less of that, just because you may not know who the lawyer is. So I would hope that young lawyers would get involved in the bar. I really do believe that is the key to a successful practice, is getting to know the other lawyers. And they're also great people. I mean, some of the best friends I have are lawyers, and those relationships are awesome. But I think, the way you interact with a person that you don't know versus the way you interact with a person that you sit down and share a meal with is quite different. So I really do think that interaction is key. And I know technology has been a plus in some respects, but it also moves us away from that camaraderie. I mean, take up a mediation, for example. At least a mediation, you bring people together in a room or a series of rooms and work out something. Now they're doing them by Zoom.
So considering all of that, what's your best advice to the upcoming generation of lawyers?
I think get involved in your local bar association first and foremost. Then get involved in North Carolina Bar Association. I think get to know other lawyers. If you are in a particular area of practice sort of exclusively, like real estate, criminal law, or whatever, workers' comp, whatever, find out when that group of lawyers meets and get involved with that group, because that will be a tremendous asset. Find lawyers who you respect or who you understand are experienced and good at their craft. Watch them practice, spend as much time around them. Call them up, tell them you want to go to lunch. Any older lawyer who's been around would be happy to do that and happy to spend time with a younger lawyer. So, we got mentorship programs. that are more formal, but there you can also create your own informal mentorship. That's what I would do if I were a young lawyer.